Hello, everyone. My name is Jackie. I will be your primary moderator for tonight. The order of our presentations today will be Alchemy, PassionFruit, SG&Co, and KMA Designs.
My name is Eira, and my partner for the installation is Gabrielle. We are both ARCID first-year students, and our project is called Alchemy. So to start off, we chose to call it Alchemy, referring to the process of taking something ordinary and turning it into something extraordinary. For our concept, we plan to use forms as a narrative to the desire to be outside but contained by the current pandemic we are all experiencing. The shapes represent windows looking to the outside, each color referencing photographs that were taken during this time and engaging in new love and unity of the sky, a view highly admired during crisis times. The different colors relating to different day-to-day moments in time, each specifically distilled and pulled. The fabric closely relates to what you would find indoors: couches, rugs, pillows. The installation is a narrative of time passing and the feeling that we all share of wanting to explore, learn, and collaborate. These shapes will be installed in different known neighborhoods in Toronto to reference the diverse city landscape. The unique collection of shapes, spaces, colors, and textures will direct a new and changed perspective for viewers to consider.
So the plan for this installation, we want to install various rectangle square shapes made of plywood. There will be 3 different methods for each. The first uses paint, the second will be using different fabric textures, and the third will be using LED light strips, forming individual light boxes. Each will vary in light, color, or fabric covering, creating vibrant, graphic, urban pieces. Once completed, objects will be placed in known neighborhoods of Toronto. Some example sites include Kensington, Chinatown, Leslieville, Cavendish-Town, Distillery, Parkdale, and Annex. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the visuals we've had put together. So this first slide is to give you an all-around feel for what we aim to achieve in our installation. We have different textures relating back to our concept of what you would find indoors. This next slide is photos that we took during COVID. And this relates back to our concept, and what you would see in our color palette is distilled directly from the photos taken. And this slide for our visual aid is to give you an idea of the concept of time and time passing. We have different photos taken at different parts of the day, and the colors that are distilled from it are a reference of that color palette. And these are some proposed sites in Toronto that we're hoping to be able to install in and take photos from, as well as a scaled rendered drawing. You can kind of get a concept of like the daytime and nighttime that we're hoping will allow for it to be more impactful. And this is just a mini light box setup. Obviously, we want to be able to play with color more, but this was just to give you an idea at different points of the day, like how impactful we can make light and color. And yeah.
Next up is our material choices. So specifically, we plan to use plywood, paint, LED, light strips, fabric, paper, and then miscellaneous things to hold these builds together. In terms of environmental features, we are hoping to obtain, if not all of our materials, most of them through secondhand. So such as getting fabric from a thrift store, picking up LED lights from a friend, or doing online community reach outs, as well as salvaging retailers' unused products, such as places from Home Hardware, Home Depot, Rona, Canadian Tire, even art supply stores. A lot of the time they have unused stock that you can just go up and ask for. We were hoping to obtain things through that. And as well, we plan to ensure afterlife use. Things such as if it was borrowed, returning it to whoever we borrowed it from, reusing any of our builds for future projects, or just having them as interesting pieces in our homes, as well as only purchasing what we need to make sure that there's no excess.
Yeah, I'll just touch lightly on this, but this is just a budget breakdown based on what each material cost value would be in our proposed budget. Obviously, from what Eira said, we are going to try to obtain most of our materials as recycled, but this just gives you an idea of like the base budget breakdown. Which brings us to proposed timeline. In January, collecting materials secondhand, unused from retailers, community asks, and marketplace. February, building and creating installation pieces from the wood and ornament exteriors. March, setting up the installation and proposed sites and photographing the builds. April, editing and distilling images, taking the installation to final for yes. And May is showtime. So we just want to thank you for everyone taking the time to listen to our proposal.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I would like to get some clarification on the scale of these installations that you're planning to place within each neighborhood.
Yeah, so in the slide, I have a scaled drawing in there. So, and some of them being as tall as 4 feet, but because of the material that we would be able to use before, I think it's 4 by 5 pieces of plywood, it will not be able to go any kind of bigger than that.
Is the goal sort of a translucent, like this glowing box?
Yes, most of them we're hoping to have is this kind of glowing aura, but as well with the ones that are covered in fabric, there's also an element of opacity, but creating organic shapes through the textures and materials that we do plan on using.
Okay. Actually, can you keep the slide up of any visual that you have? I think that would really help us visualize it. One of the comments that I wanted to say was, okay, I think it's a great idea having, especially during this time, bringing the outside to inside. I guess part of where I got a little, I guess, confused was when you chose, you talked about all these natural landscapes. And when I think about that, it's more organic shapes, but you specifically chose rectangles as these sort of looking windows. Is there a reason why you chose that specific shape for now? And as well, I think I'm having a hard time drawing connection from the nature, like these palettes that you have. I think as an audience, without the concept being there, someone passing on the streets won't connect that color aura to each specific image that you're trying to draw a connection to. So in what way can you maybe connect that better? And what's the purpose of these color palettes? If you can expand on that.
Yeah, I can expand on that. So originally this concept was derived from like the frames of what most people are experiencing within COVID restrictions. So the frames of like looking outside of like a square or a rectangle based on where you're kind of positioned. So that's kind of where the element of the geometric shapes that came in. And the palette was referencing, it was choosing to reference like those colors of sky, and the hope was that placed in an urban fabric, it was able to kind of be distilled or be able to pop out in a way that you have like a city landscape and then the sky in the background being able to pop out.
Can we go to one of the renderings that showcases the scale of the installation in relation to the surrounding? So if I understand this correctly, the installation is to be placed outside within these distinct neighborhoods around the city. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess one of my comments would then be, I think in terms of materiality, the plywood will work. The paint as well as the LED lighting does work. But when it comes to the fabric selection, I think it's really important to select outdoor fabric grade, just to make sure that it does work in where you're planning to mount these. And is the idea to just have these sitting on the floor, or is there a certain placement that you're looking to mount these on?
So going back to the reference of like the still lifes or the installations that we were looking at, it's kind of in, when executed, we hope it to kind of reference almost a still life, and it will be placed on the ground in these different areas, and the photo rendering will be the final piece from it.
And do we have that photo rendering? It's just the one on the bottom, right?
Like the photo of the installation. So once it's created in these different settings is what the final product will look like.
Okay, yeah. So I think adding to Ella's point, I do think it's a good idea, but perhaps playing with some different geometries that somehow relate back to the site. So for example, I think the rectangular form does work in neighborhoods such as the Annex and perhaps the Distillery District, because then again, it's very indicative of what that site has to offer. For example, in the Distillery, for obviously the brickwork that's present on the site, but maybe for some of the other neighborhoods where other geometries are more prominent, for example, Church Street, maybe shapes such as cylinders or maybe like a pyramid would work better for these installations. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure. We are definitely open to the inclusion of more shapes. Like, I think that works for the different places where this would be installed.
I'm wondering if your purpose is to contrast the existing site. Is that sort of part of the concept?
Yeah, it is part of the concept, because a lot of where the palette is coming from and where this kind of concept is being built from is the inside looking out and kind of this reference back to the sky and the environment. So we're hopeful that when it is installed, it'll be impactful and have that kind of contrast in the areas it's put in.
So I'm wondering if you can play with the scale of it in terms of how people can interact with this, because right now I'm imagining that people will just walk around it, right? Like they're just these boxes, as you said, on the floor. If you can somehow maybe have some bigger, have smaller, so you can physically have people being inside out and experiencing that way, maybe. I'm just trying to think of different ways that we can push this idea forward.
I agree with that idea. I think it would be more impactful to have people interact with the spaces. We could also play with maybe certain heights would work as, say, seats somewhere someone could sit in, looking from the inside out, or even if we were able to create some type of framing and some could be raised higher with relation to the bottom ones as well.
Yeah, because I think a lot of this concept was just like a beginning thought where when it comes to the execution of this, it would be nice to be, once we finally do get to build or create this, is make something a little bit more interactive and impactful. But I think this is just the grounds of where it's derived from.
I see. Yeah, I think it will make a beautiful installation the way it is now. I'm just trying to think with installations, they should alter the way that you see space. And the street that, depending on which street it's on, it would be quite interesting if you played with different translucencies and having people walk in and out between the boxes, maybe instead of it just being an object. So if you're creating an object, that's sort of a sculpture, but an installation should alter the way that people see things. So yeah, maybe pushing with the scale and yeah.
Yeah, no, those all sound like great ways to incorporate this, to push it a little bit more, to involve like people interacting with the space more.
Yeah, I think those are the only comments that we have. I'm just trying to look back at the sheet for the explanation of the urban fabric. And so key terms here are nostalgia, urban, graffiti, authentic, context, origins, and icon. So I think the touch points that we've made today, trying to get this installation to better relate to its site for where it's intended to be installed is going to be very important. And I also think we're mentioning how it's going to be installed. For example, some of them are going to be sitting on the ground. Perhaps in some of these neighborhoods, it makes more sense to have them somehow mounted somewhere higher. I don't know how feasible this may be, but for neighborhoods where there might be taller condo buildings or taller office buildings, maybe those are some of the sites that you'll be able to mount higher up. But yeah, I do think this is a great idea.
Actually, to
you.
jump off that point, so when you said that you derived these color palettes from nature, when I look at the inspiration or look and feel photos, I'm actually not getting so much of that nature anymore. So it doesn't feel as though you're trying to draw connection of the sky, or maybe it's because of the shape, as we mentioned earlier, but I think what would make it stronger of a concept statement would be to somehow connect the visual of your final product to where you derived the idea from, or the colors from.
Initially, the colors were taken from the photos, the reference photos, but I see what you mean on trying to bring it back into where we were positioned when we took these reference photos.
And I think what would be helpful if you just select maybe 3 of the sites that you mentioned, and then just stick to that and then work from there to really work with the site itself. Because right now I think it's hard to visualize exactly where and what color and where it's going to respond to the street around it. So imagining distillery district, it's red bricks everywhere. So then what would be the shapes to contrast that, and how are you bringing those elements in would be more helpful going forward.
Thank you so much for your responses and your help towards creating these things. They're definitely super impactful, and I think are something that we are excited to play with if this was going to move forward.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, is it called Luminato? The lights festival that happens at Distillery.
Yes, agreed. I would 100% agree with that.
Totally.
And so is the outcome supposed to be that you install this and then take document photos of it, and that'll be part of the year-end show?
Yes. Only because there's like struggling with the online visualization and things like that. So we were
Right.
hoping to be able to install them and like photograph them in real life, and then bring that to play so that you could see the installation and how it interacted with the space, because you technically couldn't really, all of us as a whole, go to each installation.
Yeah, I think that also came into factor when we were thinking about like the size and like how we were going to build this, because like in actuality, it would be us like building these things in probably our individual apartments unless this like COVID kind of changes. So there's a lot of like consideration. We have to think about how we could manage, or how we could maybe make something bigger than what we anticipated in order to create this more dynamic and more of a space you could visit.
Right. Actually, these squares are now kind of reminding me of pixels. So I wonder if you can, instead of going bigger, then make the scale smaller so they make up of some sort of a pixelated image. I don't know, just dreaming here.
No, I like that. That's interesting, because it's essentially the opposite what we did it in taking our reference photos. We took like one small part and made it bigger, but
That's right.
interesting to go the opposite direction and maybe creating a small image, and maybe that reference photo is the site that this will be installed in. So that's actually really great feedback.
Yeah, it'd be like you're taking a piece of, and maybe you could even show these images I find are great because they are what we look at every single day, mostly. If you somehow even incorporate this into a poster at the site, I think that would be interesting for people to see where you derive that from too.
Yeah, so
But yeah,
again,
I'm talking a lot.
yeah, sorry. So again, taking these reference photos as a talking point, how sort of the coloration of the sky and I guess what you guys do see outside of your window every day does kind of change throughout the day. Maybe your installation has that ability to kind of alter its coloration in reference to what time of day it is as well. So for example, if you are planning to incorporate the LED lighting, maybe the effect of the LED lighting is able to then modulate and mimic the coloration of the sky. I don't know if you guys will be able to set the LED to do that.
Yeah, I would love to do that. As far as the LEDs, when we were thinking about what we would be purchasing, it would be an LED that could change colors so that we could take more than one photo and also reuse kind of the same shape, but also have a variation of colors that it's showing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've provided enough comments for you guys to further move this installation project along. I guess what I wanted to ask now is kind of open up the question board to see if you guys have any other questions for us.
I feel like I'm kind of concentrating on the whole idea of this being seen as like a pixeled image. So I think that's where my interest is kind of going more rooted in, is the thought of this kind of the opposite effect. I don't know, like if you guys have any reference to any kind of artist or installation that we should maybe consider or look into to incorporate into our thoughts or process, that would be awesome. But if not, no worries.
So there actually is something that you guys could perhaps look into just as a research point. There was an event that happened recently called Terra Lumina that happened at the Toronto Zoo. I'm not sure if that's the exact name, but they basically showcase a number of lighting installations that you are able to kind of interact and walk through. So definitely take a look at that if the pixel idea is something that you guys want to push towards.
I'm just going to jump in. My name is Pooja. I'm one of the site execs. I just want to thank the panelists for jumping in and speaking a little bit longer because we are missing a panelist. Kaashif will be joining us at 6. So thank you for doing that. I have a question for the installation group actually. So I think you guys answered it in your presentation, but I just wanted to clarify. So you guys are planning to potentially build this as an installation, and then what would be showcased as a part of your installation would be the interaction and like basically this built form in context to a site, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And is that, how are you guys thinking of doing it? Is it primarily through just images? Like, have you guys considered different formats such as videos or anything like that?
We have been flip-flopping back and forth between straight photos, but also we considered doing time-lapse videos as well to really integrate the transition of the sky during the day. But that was something that we weren't quite sure exactly how the year-end show would work this year, being an online format, and didn't know how far we could play with those sorts of digital ideas.
Yeah, I think in terms of like the format wise, like we're still kind of like figuring things out as we go because of the virtual format, but we're really open to hearing what your guys's ideas are and then seeing how we can kind of incorporate that. So if you guys are thinking of a time lapse, that'd be very doable. My other question was in terms of like, because you guys would be primarily building and fabricating the plywood pieces, and because we aren't really sure about access, have you guys considered how you'd fabricate if you don't have access to a fabrication space?
So yeah, that was kind of built into our concept in it almost feels like in a perfect world, we would like to make this so much bigger and so much play with those kinds of elements. But in our initial thoughts, the pieces of wood and the shapes would only be as big as the material that we could get, and it would be pre-cut, hopefully. if we bought it at the hardware store, so that our construction would really just be bringing it back and painting it and nailing it, but there wouldn't be too much that we would actually require a wood shop for. But it all depends, I guess, also throughout the year. If things change and we had access to more facilities, we could really push this project to be something more big and more impactful. But I think in our original thought process was trying to just make it in a way that we could both achieve making this realistically.
So the plywood that you talked about, is that a frame that you're building and then sort of mounting the fabric or stretching the fabric around it? Have you considered maybe wire instead, something that's more workable within your homes?
That is a fantastic idea. We haven't touched much on things other than plywood to create the forms, but that seems like something that would be extremely doable and actually help with making some of the square and pixel spaces more translucent and not as opaque compared to other ones. So
Right.
thank
And
you
that
for
probably
that
probably depends on the type of fabric that you can get donated from, but because there's a sculptor that I love called Do Ho Se. He's a Korean sculptor that does work with fabrics and translucency a lot. He uses wire and his stitching technique primarily. So if you look at detail photos of his sculptures, they're super intricate. But the whole concept for him or his structural elements are either hung from cable wire or they're actual what are they called? Like more rigid wires to make up the shape of his rooms that he creates. So maybe look him up.
Thank you so much. I actually really think that would add a whole new level to this installation as well and take it into different forms. Be much easier to establish different things within our installation and create more variance between the squares.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from the wires and the plywood, I think another potential material choice for you guys might be a dowel and knob connection system. Just because I think the dowel material would be very easy for you guys to retrieve. And then also in terms of a weight standpoint, I think that would be a lot easier to manage for you guys since you guys are working probably out of your residential spaces and not have access to a workshop. So definitely take a look at that as well.
Sorry, and that was a wood and dowel connection?
Yeah, they're essentially dowel and then knob connections.
Yeah.
Next up, we have 3D Group 2.
For 3D experiential space, we were given the theme of urban fabric. Oh, it's not moving. Oh, there we go. This theme pays homage to our past and highlights the relationship between humans and the space around them.
Our group PassionFruit went through many ideas. To name a few models that were paid homage to the past, but COVID interpreted differently according to the viewer, extinct animals into organic forms and creating an animal and then putting them one on top of another as if it was a totem pole. But we continue to realize that these ideas were too vague, so we decided to try a topic that gave us more freedom, however, not too much that we would get lost in the creation process.
While trying to brainstorm ideas for our final model, we went through multiple ideas, but we concluded that our previous ideas were hard to work around because we would have had to been in person to build it. We also ran into some problems of what eco-friendly and sustainable materials we can use based on what each person has access to. Overall, our idea process was very long, and you can see some of our inspirations in the next slide. We looked through a variety of art pieces and architectures to try to help us inspire ourselves throughout the brainstorming process.
Through all of this brainstorming, we felt like we were most inspired by Andy Warhol's art, and we liked the whole idea of the same image but in different colors. This helped us solve the problem of not being able to meet up because of the pandemic. So this way, each one of us can work on a part of the final and put it together by taking pictures and editing it together. All 4 parts of our model will have the same concepts and similar formats, but each group member will apply their own creative thoughts and strengths to create their part.
As a group, we wanted to figure out a way to make sure all group members participate and we were all part of the build. Together, we had to think of a main message our final model should convey. As we discussed, we felt like we should focus on protests in the past and bringing out awareness to those issues. From there, we came across protests against the pipelines being built in Canada and how the Indigenous people have been constantly mistreated. The Indigenous communities have been struggling to protect their land for many years and still are to this day. There is an issue of how these communities don't have clean drinking water, but the government have millions of dollars to spend on a pipeline that would further devastate the communities. So in our final model, we will focus on these issues and bring awareness to these communities.
For the execution, we will put all these ideas together using Andy Warhol style to bring attention to the mistreatment of the Indigenous peoples. To do this, we will continue to do research on these ideas to make sure our models are as accurate as possible and use Indigenous art to grasp a similar art style. We will also be looking at different 3D objects and what kind of materials were used as inspiration.
When looking into depth at Indigenous art about the protest against the pipeline being built, we found an artist named Gord Hill, which he will inspire our creation of the final model. We will be looking towards his art when we are creating the final model.
That was muted. For our final model, we will draw inspiration from Andy Warhol's bright color scheme and the way he's configured his work while using Gord Hill's Aboriginal art as an inspiration for our imagery. When assembling our model, we will use multicolored cardstock cut accordingly to depict the various layers of our image. These will be suspended using transparent string and a wooden frame similar to the reference photo on the slide.
For the final model, each member will have a quarter of it to complete, and it will be similar to how Andy Warhol's piece is set up. The individual model will be 8 by 8 by 8 inches, and then when we put it together, it will be 16 by 16 by 8 inches. The materials that we will be using is, like mentioned before, cardstock for the actual image, transparent string to hold them together, and wooden dowels to attach the string to. And we will be relating it back to the pipeline and how it's damaging Indigenous territory and their freedom.
Okay, thank you for listening. We would appreciate any feedback regarding our concept idea. We understand that right now we have a smaller model in mind, but we're open to changing that, altering materials to make it a more interactive space.
Thank you. Thank you so much for presenting. So in terms of the size and the scale of the installation, I don't think that bigger is always better. I think the size that you guys have selected is very appropriate. One thing that I do want to clarify is that in the presentation, you guys didn't really make mention of where the installation is going to be installed. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. So we imagined that it would be in an interior space somewhere, but if we were to make it on a larger scale, even though you said it would be smaller, or it would be better smaller, it would maybe be outdoors. But this is something that we haven't like we don't have like a solid area per se.
Okay.
We were kind of thinking of like for the interior spaces, we would do places around Ryerson, like the Ryerson Library. That's kind of what we were thinking about, but we weren't really sure about like if we can do that, like permission and stuff.
Yeah, it's just because of the pandemic that it's hard to understand where we would be able to put it, but we're open to ideas. And as we move, if we move forward with the project, we will work with the panelists, not panelists, but the team to figure out other places where it can be put.
Yeah, so I mean, the location aside, I do think that you guys did put a lot of thought and effort into the whole idea of it. And kind of relating it back to the urban fabric, I think the way that you guys are kind of layering the cardstock with the transparent thread, I think is very smart. I think the one thing to kind of be careful about is the indigenous artistic style in relation to Andy Warhol's artistic style, just because indigenous art is obviously a very sensitive topic. And so I think when you guys are selecting the motif that you guys are going to be playing with, I think just try to be careful with that, because it's something that is very sensitive and people might take it the wrong way. Secondly, I also want to applaud you guys on how well you thought out how you're going to execute the project. So I definitely appreciate how you guys went into the planning of that as well. For example, choosing a base graphic or a base motif, and then kind of dividing and conquering, and then kind of reassembling back at the end. So I think, in terms of construction standpoint, I don't think you guys will run into any troubles.
Okay, thank you.
Can we go back to the slide with the motifs that you're selecting from?
Okay, just let me know when to stop.
I think there was one. Yeah, I think that one's good.
This one?
Yeah. I particularly like the bear one because it's almost like he is, I imagine that being the pipeline that they're trying to build, and he's like destroying it. Anyway, I do want to applaud you for choosing such a great topic to stand on. Like it really sends a great message. I agree with Eric, the site you should consider, but at the same time, if you really want to just make a great sculptural piece, it really could be hung anywhere. So if the sculpture piece is what you're concentrating on, then focus on making that a wow factor. I do think, how are you trying to make it three-dimensional? Like, what are the parts that you're trying to break apart as the image that's shown on the right here?
I'm not sure if you can see my cursor on the screen.
Yeah, I can see it. Okay.
So in Aboriginal art, you can see that there's a lot of, it's very, how do I explain it? It's like simplistic, but effective. So we wanted to kind of portray that in the way that it's layered. So when we would do this, it would be, for example, the base of the bear, like here. We should have made a reference photo, so it would be better to understand, but maybe like the background, just like in the photo here where there's the hair, which is like the largest part, and then it would go forward to the smaller parts like the eye and the nose. So that's the idea.
So yeah, I do love that you're interpreting this three-dimensionally, although it's a two-dimensional piece of work. That part is really interesting to me. I guess conceptually, drawing it back, I think I'm having a hard time understanding that this is a protest to the water lines and all the issues that you're talking about. To me, it seems like an interpretive piece of their work, which is also fine too. But if you did want to amp up on sending that message of a social message almost, then I would consider the site, or maybe researching a history of some sort of where it's going to be located and why it's there.
Okay, yeah, for sure. We kind of left that as an open book. Like we could change that whenever it came to actually building it. But yeah, I really do appreciate that idea.
And I'm now just thinking about materials. Cardstock might fly around with people's movement. So, but also at what height are you thinking of mounting this?
We haven't talked about that, but I would imagine that it would be at eye level. So you would be standing in front of it, so you would, yeah, like eye level. But we were also discussing if we want it to be horizontal, or if maybe we could even have it vertical, so that instead of the like layers being down this way, it would be this way. So it we're still exploring with the idea, like it's not like set in stone or anything. So yeah, that like the placement of the model would be really, I think if we wanted to push that, yeah, it would be really important to think. Yes.
I think
We
that's
also,
great.
oh, sorry.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay. We were also thinking, this was only like when we were discussing where we would place, like how we would put it together kind of. We also had an idea of like, we can put it upward, like we can attach each layer upward so that if you walk away from it, you could see the layers. And then when you look, like when you go right underneath it and look up, you could see all 4 of the images. We were also discussing that, but nothing is set in stone.
That's an interesting perspective play.
It's just an evolving idea at this point, because I feel like there's so many like ways that we could make this and enhance it, that it was hard for us to like narrow down on one, but I think we have a pretty general idea so far.
I found it really interesting when you said each team member would be interpreting something differently. And I made note saying that it would be interesting that if you would interpret the same thing, but I guess like what I'm trying to say is how you, as a designer or from your cultural background, etc., like you would interpret something different, but that was before you brought on the Aboriginal and like all the conceptual stuff after. Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see if you guys would interpret that motif differently in breaking it apart in different geometries. But yeah.
So you're suggesting that we would take one image, for instance, like the bear,
perhaps,
and show our different perceptions of it?
I'm actually not familiar with the artist that you chose. What was the name? I'm going to write him down.
Gord Hill, so Gord Hill, like the hill.
Okay, and he works 2-dimensionally.
Yes, so his work is basically surrounding this idea. So here are image inspirations. And his work really protests against these pipelines.
Actually, now I just brought another idea. I'm just looking at his prints. Part of the theme originally is graffiti, right? And graffiti art in its history is a way of tagging space and claiming it as theirs. I think it would be interesting if you could play on that idea of somehow making this a graffiti to the space that you're responding to.
Yeah,
because that would, and I'm not sure, I think you would have to be careful with taking this artist's work directly and making it into something else. Maybe you would have to do a lot more research on that and being careful around that. But if you would make this sort of have a graffiti influence to it and say, this is us tagging the space, and reclaiming that area, that may be a powerful message if you're drawing connection to the graffiti part of this whole theme.
I feel like that's a really interesting take on it. The only thing I would be concerned about is, once again, like the Aboriginal art is very not like sensitive, almost kind of topic, and I wouldn't want to like disrespect or anything. But I think if we did more research and dug deeper into the idea, then maybe it could be a good idea.
Okay, so I want to show you guys something that I've been searching up while we're in discussion of this installation. So if you guys can go back to the concept photo that you guys had.
This one?
Yes. So the images on the right, that's constructed out of cardstock. Bringing Ella's point back again, saying how cardstock might not exactly be the best material choice. I just want you guys to take a look at this link that I'm going to send to you.
In the chat?
Yep, just in the chat. So this idea is very close to what you guys were looking at. I think in this instance, you guys are able to kind of expand horizontally as large as you guys want for the installation to be. But from a very, from one perspective, you kind of see all these particles kind of come together and basically create the image that you guys are trying to talk about, right? Or in this case, this indigenous motif. So in terms of the height, I do think that you guys had the right idea, having the installation set at eye level. This installation, again, can also work vertically. So it really just depends on where you guys plan to have the installation installed. But yeah, I think looking at this reference image will kind of hopefully push you guys towards a clearer direction on how you guys want to take this installation, because I do think that the idea that you guys currently have presented is very, very strong.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't see the chat right now when I share my screen, but I will look at it afterwards. Or if I could,
yeah.
Or if I could stop share, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that.
I think we can stop share. It's fine.
Let me see.
While you're looking at that, I did have a question for your group. So it seems like from the image there, it seems like there's a very like one perspective view on this installation. I'm wondering, because you guys did talk about like having 4 separate group members, like putting together parts and pieces. Have you guys considered altering the directionality of the proposal?
No, we have not considered that, but that is something that would actually, I think, enhance the whole experience of our piece. But how would you suggest we do that?
It just seemed like because from the images, it seemed like your the audience can only like stand in one spot, and then they get an idea of like the overall image and such. I think if you guys are playing with that idea of like representing the individuality, I think it would be cool to see something come together where it's not just like you're not only seeing the entire installation from one viewpoint. If you kind of like move around, it kind of alters that and kind of embraces that the individuality aspect of it.
Like similar to the link that was just sent in the chat, I just looked at it, and that's a really cool idea, actually. I like the idea, I just don't understand how it would be done. It seems, but if we, Ajantha's laughing at me, but I feel like if we maybe, what's the word, researched more on that type of art style, then we could definitely incorporate that in our design as well.
What I thought of when you were saying that is that like we have like a cube and each face is like a different, like I don't even know, like each face of the cube is a different artist like interpretation of the image. That's kind of what I thought of when you were saying it.
Yeah, that could also be one way to do it, because the Andy Warhol style is where they're all cubes. So if you like, or all squares. So if you try to reimagine it in three-dimensional, then it could be a cube. But that's something we would discuss in depth later. Yeah.
So I'm looking at Gord Hill's art, and his art is primarily just prints with black. Will you be applying different colors to the motif that you chose? And will it be different colors per motif?
Yes, so we wanted to derive the color scheme from the Andy Warhol kind of style, where, sorry, let me if I just like share my screen again. Yes, we have a small picture in the bottom, but that was basically our idea, where we would use more vibrant colors to bring attention to our piece. But at the same time, we were also discussing maybe it would be better to use colors that are related to the indigenous culture and their artwork. But it's just something that we would have to think about.
This concludes our 3D presentations. After our 15-minute break, we will move on to our 2D presentations. At this moment, we can take questions from the audience or for you to get a glass of water or take a quick break. We will begin again at 6:30.
Just wanted to say thanks for the two teams that presented. Great job.
Thank you, guys.
Yep, great job, PassionFruit.
Thank you both so much.
Congratulations on the two groups. I just wanted to say that we have more panelists joining us for the next half. We got Kaashif. I saw you, coming in at 6. Hi, Kaashif. So nice seeing you. We also have other people from the first breakout room. We're welcoming Lucas and Erica, as well as all of the audience members from them. So again, we'll begin at 6:30. Can't wait to see you guys for the 2D presentations. Thank you.
So welcome back, everyone. So we have new panelists joining us for the second half. We have Lucas Tone and Erica Wolf. And we also have the panelists from the previous session, Ella Gao, Eric Truong, and Kaashif, sorry if I'm not saying this right, Kaashif
Furquan, yeah.
Furquan, okay, sorry about that. So I'm Pooja, one of the site execs. We also have John, Pansy, and Jackie, also from the site team, and we have Eleanor and Simona from the admin and ops team. And Jackie will just introduce the next group that's going to be presenting for us. Also, for the new panelists that are joining us, feel free to also comment for this session as well.
Hi guys, we are Street & Co. We're here to present to you our concept for our installation called Common Thread. So just to review, this year's Yes team inspired our team to think about new ways to design inclusively and interactively. So our team thought consciously about how this year was impacted by the global pandemic and how it changed our everyday life. Again, just a revision of the urban fabric theme. It highlights the relationship between humans and space and the physical aspect of urbanism, which are both things that we tried to achieve in our project.
So here's a little bit about our team. So my name is Victoria and I'm a first year arts student, and the strengths that I bring to the team are experience in Adobe programs as well as some aspects of traditional art and digital art.
Sorry about
Matt,
that.
do you want to go ahead?
I'm Shirelle. I'm a first year arts student and I've experienced in traditional art, typography, and Adobe programs.
Hi, I'm Mannat. I'm a fourth year arts student and I have most experience in Adobe programs Rhino and AutoCAD.
So now for our installation called Common Thread. For our concept, we're exploring the duality of isolation and connection in the context of our city and our spaces. In the current state of the world, the urban fabric has been compromised through the transition from our normal interactions in physical spaces into a modified version of these interactions, either in public settings with masks and social distancing rules, or in digital spaces that bring us together virtually over large distances. We now redefine our connectivity through new experiences and memories with each other while apart and in modified spaces.
So here are some slides of some inspiration images. So first we have this color palette of this orangey tone and bluish tone that are very nice in contrasting each other. And then also some retro inspired kind of typography that we referenced that is sort of from the revision branding that we pulled from. And then here are some of the sketches. So one of these sketches are mine, and we wanted to kind of explore this idea of sort of this like still life where there's like different motions and like one single figure in the middle to sort of show some interaction within a space. And then here are some more initial sketches that sort of outline possibly using a room as a container, or also just like a regular rectangle as a container for our piece. And then here's another sort of inspiration that we pulled from a video game that has this sort of cohesive color palette that we wanted to use, as well as just possibly the actions that someone could have or interactions within a space that one can have. So here are some sketches that, rough sketches of things that will be included in a final rendering that we have in the presentation. And it sort of explores my art style a little bit, even though this is a little bit rough right now.
You can actually go back a slide. Okay. Yeah. So in our mock example that you'll see in a couple slides, we've created scenes of like two people that move through the city. We show how they experience isolation and how they're still connected in their narrative. So like Victoria said, she created these scenes where people meet and interact with each other. This example that you're seeing on the screen right now is probably something that would be repeated in different types of scenes. So our ideas are also from the perspective of students, so they're guided by our own experience, but we want to expand on how general everyday life would be for different type of people. So our goal with Common Thread is to kind of show how there's a common thread between our narratives and the experiences everyone else is having today. And we're kind of using a storybook or comic like visual. So yeah.
For the background of this 2D installation, we want to demonstrate how interconnected our city is, which is why we chose to use a map of Toronto that features the streets and subway lines. We also added a face mask motif into the urban fabric, creating visual noise, which represents the environmental disturbance caused by masks being discarded onto the streets when people dispose of them inappropriately.
So here is sort of a mock rendering of what we are trying to do. So this includes sort of kind of a run through of how we want to like have the tasks between all of our team members. So as you can see, there are different scenes within all of them, and each sort of bubble represents like a kind of social bubble that people are in. So either they're in their room, that sort of represents like the sort of area that they're focused within, or if they're interacting with other people, the bubble sort of increases to have that interaction within that sort of space. And then also, we wanted to also add some doodles within or between the typography and the spaces, and possibly like add some extra visual effects in order to make it more cohesive. Even though this is kind of rough, we're still trying to, or in the future, we might want to work more with the color palette as well as possible other visuals that we can add into it.
Oh, did you want to go back a slide just to, so Shirelle can talk?
We also want to convey the various emotions that one feels in different states of isolation and interaction throughout the city. And we did this by incorporating text that connects to the scenes. Currently, we've included the words connection, freedom, conversation, gratitude, and monotony. These words are written in a graffiti-like street-style typography to enhance the urban aesthetic of the installation.
All right, so like Victoria said, it's important to say that this is just an abstract version of where our final 2D installation would look like. It would also possibly be a horizontally longer series. We would probably want to execute this in kind of like a website format. We could use After Effects and InDesign to create this, creating more animations and GIFs that could create a more interactive experience through a website. There's also the option of using After Effects to create an animation. So almost like a time lapse or a movie, assuming that we would kind of zoom into these scenes and have kind of like a story be told. You can go to the next slide. So when we worked on this together, we delegated our roles based on our strengths and our skill sets. So far, Victoria handled most of the characters and the scenes that you've seen. Shirelle handled the text, and I made the background render that you saw in the mock-up. So in order to keep our visuals consistent moving forward, we would most likely continue using our roles, but likely would probably overlap and work collaboratively together to share the tasks, assuming that we would do an additional series or creating a longer one.
I just want to add on that for future series, we possibly thought of interviewing other people to have other narratives instead of just our perspective as students. And then overall, what kind of things that we need are very minimal. We mostly thought that a drawing tablet for both Mannat and Shirelle would be the best option. And based on like different sites that I looked at, the drawing tablet was about $105. So the total would come to $210. And for programs, we have Adobe for like the Adobe systems for free through FCAD, as well as some other free programs that we're using. So that is pretty much our total for the budget.
All right, thank you guys so much for your time. We hope that you enjoyed hearing our ideas, and we hope for an opportunity to bring our concept to life at the Arts Branch.
At this time, we're welcome to any questions or feedback about any aspect of our project.
I just want to say I love the graphics of your entire presentation.
Yay, thanks.
I think it's interesting that you're using animation and really focusing on the way that people interact with their space right now. I think it could be cool if you animated experiences that everyone can connect to or relate to, and in that way drawing connection through, like, everyone can look at it and relate to it, and it could be this fun, playful, like, oh my gosh, I do that every day. But in instances where you are isolated. And yeah, and another thing I wanted to say was I think the next step would be good to have some sort of storyboard or animatics, just so we know what in each instance you're trying to illustrate. And it's almost like a nice a fun documentation of what the state of our life is like right now, especially with your graphics and the way your color palette is laid out. Yeah, lots of fun.
Thank you.
So just, I want to jump into a little bit about the costs associated to creating this sort of installation, a 2D installation. Are there going to be other costs associating with uploading these graphics onto a web server or some sort of website host if you guys are planning to upload this onto a website?
So currently we don't have too much research right now, but we are thinking of possibly going more into that. We do have a little bit left in the budget. I think it's like around $40 to host a website. So that might be a possibility.
Yeah, so I mean, I even think that maybe some of the budget allocation can get shifted towards that from the tablet usage. I don't know if every member needs to have a tablet to work on these graphics, just because there are other softwares that are available, such as, I guess if you're doing vector-based backgrounds, like I can see in the background there, that could be a potential possibility as well. Another thing I wanted to bring up was kind of, if you guys were to make this into an animation, I think that would be a very good idea, but it'll also be very heavily dependent on whoever is animating this, obviously. So I just want to make sure that you guys have just thought about the resources and how you're going to kind of divide the tasks up. Another idea that I had was perhaps if one person is working on the backgrounds, perhaps you have several scenes that are kind of created, several background scenes that are created, for example, like a room environment, office environment, cafe environment, and then kind of have animations or GIFs of how different people will interact in these different spaces. So essentially you're having the same background being used, but the animation and person within these spaces kind of differ, just because people use the spaces differently throughout the day, right?
Right. No, that's really similar to the stuff that we were brainstorming about when we first started. So originally I was responsible for like creating several different backgrounds, but for the sake of this presentation, I thought it would be more consistent for one person to handle all of the animations. But you're absolutely right. If we were to put this on the scale of like a website or even an animation, it would definitely fall to one person to handle most of the animation. So yeah, that's definitely really helpful to think about.
I was gonna say the same thing as Ella as well about the graphics. I think it's so refreshing to see something like this. You know, in design, everything can be super tailored, minimal. But doing something like this is an interesting take on interior design. It kind of reminds me of like the set design class that most people have the opportunity of taking much later on in third year and whatnot. I think my main question is that if this installation or project was not to be digital and was to be something that's more physical, how would you tackle that, or what would it look like? Would it still have the same message or the same essence as what you're doing now?
Victoria, do you want to answer that, or?
Yeah, I think it might hold a very similar sort of route because it is a 2D installation, so there's not really much we could sort of expand. There is like a possibility of like the medium that it could eventually turn into, like it could be printed on a poster, or I don't know. Anything else to expand on? Mannat?
Yeah, no, I feel like we were limited by thinking only 2D, which is why thinking of like a website was the first idea we came up with. But if this was more of a 3D installation, I think it would be cool to kind of play with like maybe projections onto like walls and like incorporate like the animation in like a room, really create like a little mini interior somewhere. I think that would be probably an interesting way to show it. And I feel like maybe the direction of like how our graphics are shown, because this was definitely more like fun, and we were inspired by like the grunge look and even our graphics are very like, they're like little caricatures. So I think if it was 3D and if it was placed into like a room or something, maybe the direction of our graphics would be more mature possibly, or maybe more detailed or possibly black and white. But yeah.
Yeah, like, no, I definitely think, sorry, go on, go for it.
I agree. I definitely think that because we sort of limited our minds to thinking about 2D, we definitely went with a more cartoonish sort of look. But if we did have the freedom of having this in person, I think we would maybe expand on different ways that we can represent this concept. And I agree with sort of maybe having projections onto walls, if it were maybe just one room with, you know, maybe each wall was like a different scene or something like that. Yeah, we haven't thought that much about how we would expound it if it wasn't in person, but there are definitely ways.
No, I was also going to say, like, I mean, when you guys are talking about projections, it's interesting. Like, have you guys also thought about VR? That is like an interesting aspect of still trying to keep it digital, accessible, you know, to people who are at home as well. I think it's like an interesting route to see. Just so that I think like the graphics are great, and I think like if you were to do it in a 3D setting, if it doesn't necessarily like have to be a physical setting, it could be still like digital and still this whole world kind of like a game in a way.
Yeah.
So it's something to think about. I think it's like an interesting idea, and I feel like you guys can definitely like develop it further on.
Thank you for that. I'm definitely kind of considering bringing it possibly into Unity, because I know that's like a game development program. So that might really help with producing like a more interactive and sort of game-like installation. So I think that might be really interesting to figure out.
Yeah, for sure.
Hi guys, thanks for the presentation so much. It's so colorful and so fun. I love it.
Thank you.
I was just kind of wondering, maybe you said already, but what are the animations themselves going to consist of?
So the animations are probably going to consist of movements within a space. So it could be, for example, in the cafe scene, it could be the two characters talking to each other, or it could be, I don't know, maybe the text might pop up of what they're talking about, because that could be really relevant to how they interact in the space. If it's at home while they're going in Zoom or whatever, it could be, I don't know, just like, I don't know, distractions like phone like notifications and stuff, that sort of thing.
Okay, so it's more about like the connections that have changed between people, or is it about how the spaces have changed?
It's both. It's a little bit of both. It is sort of brought across with a bit of the text as well, that sort of express the different feelings or different things that have come up now. And does anybody else have something to say?
Yeah, I guess animation is really fun because there's so many different ways you can emphasize like certain aspects of like the physical environment. So definitely be mindful of like colors you're using or line weights, just so like some parts pop out more and we're kind of emphasizing like what has changed maybe in a way.
Yeah.
And then another question I had was, for the locations on the map itself, is that gonna have some bearing on like what animation pops up, or will it be kind of arbitrarily placed?
I think for the mock, it was definitely like very arbitrarily placed because we just wanted like a background that kind of signified like map and like space and like what a city looks like. But that's not something we've explored yet, like whether we want to be specific about where each scene is placed. But I think that would be interesting to like think about. Right now, I think it's kind of just, it's very like abstract and implied, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think if I bring it into sort of a game sense, if I bring it into a game sense, it might work out really well.
Because it could be fun even if you kind of look up on a map, maybe not for the home sequence, but like if you're gonna have it on the train, like make sure it's on like the subway map of Toronto or like in a cafe. So when people click on like a cafe, they can be like, oh, I've been to that cafe. Like I can relate to that experience. It might be a bit more interesting that way.
It would definitely make it less arbitrary and more grounded in our city, and be more relatable, showing known places in Toronto that people could locate on the map. So that would be a really cool thing to look into.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. And also, if you need any interviews, you can interview me how office life has been. I don't mind.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I had a question about audio. Have you guys considered what you would be putting on?
That's really interesting. I
Yeah,
don't think
no,
we
we
really
haven't.
considered it. But if on the conversation of like making it into a bit of a game, I think, yeah, that would totally be an option. I think maybe looking into ways to record it might be really much more authentic. But yeah, I think that would be really interesting. If you have like audio libraries that you suggest, that might be kind of nice to look into too.
Yeah, just wondering, like maybe it's background music or sound effects or even recordings of people just murmuring in the background, just to add to that effect of whatever it is you're trying to portray, the feeling that you're trying to portray. Could be a very powerful aspect to add onto the animation.
Thank you.
Next up, we have 2D Group 2.
So hello, everyone. I want to start off thanking everybody for taking time out of their night to be here. My name is Kristen, and my partners are Matthew and Alexis, and we're all first-year students at ARCID. So our group name is KMA Designs, and for our presentation, we named it Origin. We titled it this because for our installation, we want to focus on the foundation of Toronto and like what it has been built from, and focus on design elements that can be seen throughout the past and the future. So to get a better understanding of our vision, in a city that is constantly growing and evolving, it is important to acknowledge the places this society has been built off of. So in the short video that we plan to create, we hope to showcase the origins of Toronto and display the beautiful urban fabrics found within our city that have shaped Toronto into what it is today. So we hope to capture the streetscapes, culture, buildings, and signage that not only has made our city unique and beautiful, but also carry a strong historic meaning behind it. So our overall goal with this video is to showcase the roots of our city, and not to necessarily glamorize it, but to breathe life back into the streets, because we want to remind people, what they've been missing due to COVID, and that they, haven't been able to go out and see our city.
So this is just some inspiration that we had for our video. It includes buildings, streetscapes, signage, lighting, roads, art, and more. However, this does not include traffic or people, as urban fabrics is more focused on the physical components of a city or settlement. And urban fabrics is also connected to not also the newer components of the city, but also the older parts. And this could include like older churches, towers, gates, town buildings, and more. And this is what we were, where we would choose our location would base off and showcase a variety of these things.
So I went around on the Google Street View, and I looked around for areas in Toronto that had some sort of historic meaning behind them. I also went on to Google and I searched for historic buildings that were protected that couldn't be removed because they have some sort of I don't know what it's called, but they have like a protection to them where they can't be destroyed. So some of those places were Toronto Old City Hall, Gooderham Building, the Distillery District, the Beardmore Building, Graffiti Alley, and a few other places that are on the map that I made there. The software we'll be using are the Adobe Suite, so Premiere and Photoshop, and we'll be using a GoPro with a 4K camera so that it can be really wide and show the, I guess, the whole sort of scene that we're trying to capture, as well as any photos we take will be done with a Canon camera. And we chose to do with these programs because most of us have some experience with the Adobe Suite. I do make some short films in my spare time, and Premiere is what I use, so that's why I sort of pleaded with the group to let me use my program and sort of take the reins on that and sort of help guide with the video editing and the photo editing. Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward, if our installation is chosen for the final show, our process would begin in the start of February. So that's where we'd spend 1 or 2 days during that first week, visiting the locations that Matthew has just talked about, and getting footage of the different buildings, artworks, and places that relate back to our main theme. Then moving into the second week of February is when we begin to sort through all the footage we got and pick out what works best for the vision that we have, and deleting some stuff, but keeping all of the main components that would best fit our final product. And so during the final last 2 weeks of February is when we would begin compiling our final video and putting it all together with music, like putting it all timed and everything to create our final video. We've chosen to start this project so early on, given the amount of time that we have, mainly because we want to have March and April as months where we can make any final changes and additions to our video, almost like a grace period, without having the possibility of falling behind with creation and just making this whole process a lot less stressful for us. It could also kind of play into, we have to take into consideration the weather, of course. So in February, it's going to be snowing, maybe in April nearing the end months, we'll have our video prepared, but maybe we want a different perspective of the city, a different season. So it just gives us a lot more flexibility. And we think that with this timeline, if it's used correctly, if it's followed correctly, there would be no issue with having our final video ready and perfect for the year-end show on May 3rd, because we'd have more than enough material to work with.
So for our budget, there really is no required budget as we have all the equipment and materials and shooting equipment that we need for the video. We would only possibly be spending money on transportation to Toronto in order to capture the videos and pictures that we would be using. And it would also depend on if we were to drive to Toronto or take the train, like GO train or subway. And that is all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you guys so much.
So I want to say I absolutely love this idea. I was doing some research on gentrification recently, and I think you can really shine light on how the city has transformed in the past and how our cityscape has changed now into so many condos. And I'm just thinking when you presented, I was thinking about Honest Eds and the signage that used to be there and how are they preserving that. And also thinking about the Gardiner highway underneath. There's a place called Underpass Park. That was another place that I thought of. Maybe you guys can use that area to show before and afters of how the city has transformed, and do some research to dig up what the city used to look like. For places like Dundas Square, it's not as fabulous as it is now. Before, it used to be called the Ward. Back in, I can't recite the year now, but search up the Ward, and it used to be a less vibrant cityscape. And now that all the signage has transformed it into basically a smaller Times Square, it could potentially bring some interesting contrast to the video that you're going to put together. And yeah, I love the idea of how the city has evolved, because it has gone through so much transformation through the ages. And yeah.
I definitely think the before and after idea is really cool. because our video can kind of turn into almost like a history lesson of Toronto, which is really, really cool, and it's put in a really artistic way. So I like your comments.
Yes, and to extend on Ella's point, I think Toronto people have this hunger for accessing the history, like the rich history here, whether it be, you know, like the historical boroughs for like the different waves of like migrant people, or like kind of the erasure of these different neighborhoods that just don't exist, like where the skating rink is in front of City Hall, used to be like a shanty town made of like waste and like wood scraps, and there's like photos of that. So I think like your project inspires people to want to engage in that conversation, and the stories and the connectivity in engaging in that conversation is how cities kind of survive historically. So it's great. I think it inspires people to think deeper as to what collective knowledge they have, which I think is extremely important these days with all of the gentrification. A lot of these renovations are really interesting too. Like some people will honor historical buildings that have historical status, and some developers will just like scoop the insides out and then leave the outside. Like the rules are very gray, it seems. But that's another conversation that's important to have as young people who are going to be involved in the future of the city. So it's great.
Yeah, so Lucas, I was actually working on a project that was a little bit like that. I'm not going to mention which project, but there are a lot of developers that do that. What they essentially do is they keep the facade of the building, and what they'll do is they'll gut the whole entire interior. But for this project that you guys are doing here, I think it'll be interesting not just to talk about the past, the present, but also about the future of Toronto. Basically, on a lot of the sites now that you see around Toronto, there's a lot of these proposed development signs that you'll see. So maybe taking that and kind of inserting that into your presentation, your video, your film would also be an interesting idea that you guys can look into.
Hi guys, thanks for your presentation so much. I don't know, are you only going to put new footage that you shoot in February and stuff into your presentation? Because I know the Toronto Public Library and probably Ryerson, they probably have archival photos and maybe even footage that you might be able to access for your project. So it might be nice to kind of see the contrast between of what those spaces used to be and what they are now. Even on Instagram, I'll see like old videos of like Dundas Square and there's no sky rises anywhere. So I think that would be something really interesting to consider for your project. And as well, there's some books that I've read. I can find the title of the book and send it to you guys. But basically, it's kind of a walking tour of Toronto where you can take a walking tour and kind of learn about the history of the area and the space and the buildings. So I would definitely look into reading some of those books as well, just to help with like your context.
Yeah, developing this project, looking at images that you're just talking about and putting those in would be super cool, especially talking about the before and after, and then kind of doing a side by side. So, you know, this is what it looked like a couple of years ago, this is what it looks like now, and then if we're going to incorporate, you know, what it could be in the future, that's the next clip. And yeah, I would love, we would all love to get that book name if that is possible.
Of course. Yeah, and just adding into like putting maybe imagery or videos maybe of what the future might look like. You see all these kind of signs that have the development proposals, which have very blocky renderings of like the skyscrapers that will go up after. I don't know, that could be an interesting aspect to put in as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely a good idea. Yeah.
I was going to say, to extend on Erica's point, if you ever have an opportunity to go to the Toronto Archives north of DuPont, once they open, it's an incredible photo resource, especially with their like macrofiche of all the photography of the city between like 1880 and 1930. The city commissioned like 3 or 4 photographers full time to just document intersections through the years. So there's a lot of like street level photos of the whole downtown core. It's super cool. And a lot of it's digital. So check out the Toronto City Archives website too.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to quickly add in, bouncing off of what like Erica's point in saying looking into the Ryerson archives, I fully am behind that. Last year our show was all about archive, and it's kind of interesting how it's moved on to something that's more broad, and I think that's amazing that you're trying to find more information about Toronto's past. Like I feel like it is something that we need to look more into and have the information that's done in a more accessible way, like you guys are doing right now. And I think like I have a question in terms of how far back are you trying to go and show in terms of the past and show like what it is now, and how far back are you guys thinking of going?
I'm not like 100% sure on how far back we want to go, but I know that we would like to explore those ideas of going, into the past and looking at what Toronto used to be and what it is now. And that was the word, yeah, gentrification. I was trying to think of that earlier. So I don't know. I think it's a really good idea for us to look back. I'm not sure how far we would go, but probably 30, 40 years maybe, because that's sort of around the time when I guess a lot of stuff started happening. I think I'm not 100% sure on Toronto's history, but I'm pretty sure like, it wasn't that long ago that Toronto started being developed, and when everything sort of exploded and now we have these huge buildings.
I mean, yeah, for sure. Like, no, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
No worries. I was just gonna like add on to your point. I think like, yeah, that makes complete sense. And even if you go into like the Ryerson archives, you'll get to see like how Ryerson itself was acting during that time and what happened to all of like Ryerson's historical buildings. I think like Kerr Hall is really like what we kind of have left, and you'll figure out like stories of why they were trying to, break down these historical buildings and modernize them, just because people were getting fed up of the aftermath of what happened after World War II and how they didn't want anything to remind them of that and what they all did. So it's very interesting, and the information you'll find is honestly super, super cool and super informative. So I think it's like really exciting that you guys are taking this path. I think it's really cool.
And just to add, again, yeah, we don't have a time frame, but after like some of the comments have been made, there's even a potential to look at, buildings from like the threshold when it kind of went from, kind of classical builds to, because now we have modern stuff, right? So like where that switch kind of happened. And I'm thinking about how there are these historical buildings that are, they still have got these like beautiful exteriors like that are aged and have like, a story behind it, but the interior is gone. It's all new and modern and completely redone. So I'm thinking that we could potentially even look at those kinds of builds, like for the past version, looking at those kinds of builds that still have like architectural essence rather than, the modern builds that we have now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a full-on historical intervention, and I think that's super interesting. You should also talk to Professor Barbara Vogel. She's very much well-versed in this type of topic, so
Yeah, do you have the spelling for her name? I'm not 100% sure on
I'll type it out and send it to you.
I was gonna say, if you're going back 50 years, that's when like all the brutalism was happening, and Canada is really good at brutalism, like across the board. And we've returned to like appreciating the kind of like earnest visual clunkiness. I think the building I hear of most in Toronto, besides our like normal landmarks, is the hospital near U of T that looks like a turkey, but it was supposed to look like a peacock, but it just looks like a turkey hospital. I'm gonna make a note of that in my review.
I'm gonna bring back the note about audio too for you guys. What are you thinking of putting in there?
At the moment, I don't think we haven't really discussed audio. Definitely something we want to include. But what I'm thinking right now is maybe, upbeat. Maybe we can go for non-copyright music, or even try to dabble with making our own music to it. But something definitely upbeat and that can go along with the clips changing could be really cool.
Yeah, possibly even adding some 3D sound. I wasn't sure how we would record that, but I know there are like headphones that you can wear that record like left and right channels. So we could be walking around the city showing like like an old part of the city, or possibly having a photo that would be, on like a slideshow, but then, in your headphones you're hearing like, cars, traffic lights, like you're hearing like what new Toronto sounds like, but you're seeing what old Toronto looks like. So it's sort of like a what's that called? Like I forget what it's called now, like where there's like the contrast of the two.
I was gonna say contrast as well.
Yeah. There's a word for it though. There's like where you have like two things that are different side by side. I forget what it's called, but
Juxtaposition.
yes, that's it. Yeah. That's it.
That's great. Yeah. I just think it could be a whole immersive experience if you add a different visual or senses to what you're producing.
Yeah, definitely audio is like a very important part of like filmmaking in general. Like having like a strong audio is definitely like very important. Like if you ever tried to watch a movie without audio, it's just like it's very like uninteresting, and like you can't get sucked into it because you're just watching a bunch of, scenes flickering rather than, hearing what's going on. You don't feel immersed in what you're watching or like the space that you're in. So definitely adding some sort of audio, whether it's music or 3D sound, or maybe even both, like at certain points if it fades in and out. Possibly even like sound effects of like, like a bike bell being rung, or like pressing the button like to cross the road, like the beep noise that it makes. Stuff like that would definitely add to the body of the video as a whole.
I just have a question for your team about, in terms of like the mood of your film, have you guys considered that? Is it meant to be a more so like a moody rendition of this installation, or is it more so upbeat? Like, what are you guys thinking in terms of that?
Does someone else want to take this, or do you want me to take the question?
Up to you.
Okay, so I think we never really discussed like a mood per se, but more, I guess the overall mood would be kind of not like solemn, but more sort of on the side of like reflection, not much on sort of like super like excited, going like, but definitely, because change is good in my opinion. I think change is definitely something that if you're stuck in your comfort zone, nothing ever changes, you never go anywhere. So you need to, expand on ideas and make changes. Having things that are stuck in the past are definitely strong to keep your roots, which is why gentrification is not a super happy topic for everybody. Some people hate the idea of changing old buildings, so it would definitely be like um, a more solemn idea, more relaxed sort of mood, talking about how it's meant to make people feel, not really on like, hey, look at this city, it's very cool now because we've destroyed everything that was that was cool back then. We've made it we've made it better. Like, it's not like it's better, it's more just it's change, it's different. So we've expanded on you know, on architecture, on designs, on like the creativity back then and what creativity is now. So that's.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think another, like just to add on to what Matthew's saying, but we can even do this with with the audio, but keeping the idea like of a realistic mode and like present, like this is real life. I'm thinking like when I'm thinking about audios, like we could go for, you know, a kind of video game type beat or, you know, other kind of stuff, but I really want to make it seem like this is real. You can walk out of your house and you can see this stuff. This isn't like futuristic or, you know, fiction. Like this is present. This is like current. So I think the mood is like, I don't want to say serious and make it all like hyper focused, but serious in the sense where this is life rather than, oh, it's make believe, if that makes sense.
I think it'll be really important for you to figure out the storytelling aspect of this video. Of course, it's a work in progress at the moment, but yeah, what's the message that you're trying to send and how do you hone down on that instead of just showing random clips and before and afters and etc. I think that will ground the concept a bit more. Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was a question or if that was like a statement of like, are you asking us how we would do it, or like, are you just making sure that we know that we should do that?
Yeah, just food for thought for moving forward, how you would approach the storytelling aspect. Yeah. But if you have an answer.
I don't have an exact answer, but I know what you mean though. Like I said, I've made a couple videos, I've done a couple podcasts. I know there has to be, you know, like an overarching storyline to what's going on. So we were just trying to figure out like, you know, like what even is, like what are we even doing? Like what is the year-end show? Like what is this? So we tried to figure out what that was first, and then we came up with the idea to do the video and to show the history of Toronto. So we haven't had, you know, the best time to come up with a storyline, but definitely that's one of the first things we would probably do is think of, you know, how we're gonna use video to tell a story. How will the audio, you know, go along with that, and how are we going to bring this to life and give feeling to or give some sort of emotion to the people that are watching this, and really, like, you know, not just tell the story, but make them feel like they're in the story as well, because we're all part of the story. We're all here at this moment, and, you know, later on people are going to look back at, you know, what we're doing right now, and they're going to be, you know, maybe telling our story, right? We're telling someone else's story and what might happen. They're going to tell our story and, you know, what might happen in the future. So that's one of the things we're gonna have to look into. Yeah.
I also think that, you know, we came into this and our main idea right off the bat was like a reflective piece, you know, look at what we're missing because of COVID, look at our city. But, you know, after today and after all the comments and discussion that we've had, you know, it can definitely change into something else. And, you know, our overarching theme could be, you know, change is good, change is bad, you know, it can definitely change. So there's definitely a lot of things that can go with this video, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, one of the things about gentrification and also change in general is that it feels foreign, and that could be scary, but definitely a lot of emotions to play on depending on which direction you want to go with. And one of the, I guess, arguments for gentrification and change is that it's just evolving with the times, and perhaps it's necessary, even though I think we should be paying tribute to what our roots were and what it used to be. So yeah, depending on which route, it could be a scary feeling. It could be that it's, like Eric said earlier, you can focus on the future of what could be and what would be coming. And then, or you could be making a reflectance and remnants feeling of what the generation before us might have seen and what we missed out on and or need to pay tribute to in the past, and really pay homage to that. So many directions.
Thank you to our presenters and our panelists. This concludes all our presentations. Now we will wait for our main host to regroup us back into the main meeting room for closing remarks.